good vibrations.
Hello, this is Julia Hummingbird Jewel, SOUL-utions, a book review show for mind readers. This is our 12th show, and today featuring Dr. Monique Hunt, Master Ancestral Storyteller, and her beautiful book, Village Pearls, Sacred Practices to Nourish Your Soul. But before we get started, like in every show, I always ask the author to choose a cause. That's because my mission statement is to teach love by being an example of love. And what better way than to showcase authors, find out what's behind their book, what they're doing, and to facilitate the spiritual principle of service. And so Monique chose the Gladys Carter Memorial Scholarship Fund, and this is from Mesa College in San Diego, California. And Gladys Carter's commitment to women's education was very strong, especially women returning to college. And so each year, 2 to 3 students in the fashion or design industry receive scholarships from $1,000 to $2,500. And Gladys was just this amazing intuitive and a fabulous designer who traveled the world. You're going to hear a little bit more about her in just 1 minute. I'm going to introduce my beautiful guest, Dr. Monique Hunt. She's the founder of the International Ancestor Wisdom School and a 4th generation intuitive. She's guided hundreds of ancestral training workshops, sacred ceremonies, and talks all around the world. As a sacred celebrant, Dr. Monique custom designs these ceremonies to help you partner with your ancestors to create healthy relationships, foster self-love, vibrant health, and just enabling you to fulfill your soul's purpose. So her devotion to the ancestors comes from training with her ancestors both in the physical and in the spirit form. So Monique was fostering a career as an engineer when she started to receive divine guidance. And that took her on a whole nother route and cultivated her current repertoire. So she went on to receive her doctorate in metaphysical counseling from the University of Sedona and started training with spiritual leaders all around the globe. And she's been 2 decades later is implementing these teachings of ancestral reverence in her life. So through her story clearing sessions and ancestral ceremonies, she's helped hundreds of clients with their known and unknown ancestors for healing and guidance. So Dr. Monique is a spiritual teacher and an ancestral story clearing practitioner, and she uses the healing power of your life stories and your ancestors' guidance to help you create a clear path for living your soul's purpose. She's passionate about what she does, and this woman has such a giving heart. You have to stay to the end of the show because you're going to be receiving like over 20 free gifts. Welcome to the show, Monique. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, and thank you for welcoming me. It's so wonderful to be here, and thank you for that introduction. I love it.
Okay, so we want to know a little bit about Gladys Carter, who she is to you then and now.
Okay, so Gladys Carter is my grandmother, and Gladys Carter, or Gram as I called her, Gram when I was a little girl, and then as we grew up, she became Gram. Gram was a very intuitive woman, a very strong woman, an amazing mother who raised 5 children on her own after she divorced, educated all of her children, believed in the power of education and stimulating your mind. And I remember when I told her that I was going to start to do this work, she said to me, I wish I had had someone when I was growing up that could have guided me and supported me with living my purpose, because I think things would have been different. She was an absolutely amazing seamstress. And I believe that had she been able to attend college, she would have been able to use those gifts even more.
Yeah.
And really been able to share them. So for me, she became a source of support and inspiration
Right.
and a source of guidance. And then after she transitioned into the spirit world, what I received from her were messages and encouragement to really share this work on a deeper level. Now, she and my grandmother on my father's side, so Gladys is on my mother's side,
Okay.
and my grandmother on my father's side were both very intuitive women. My grandmother on my father's side was a healer. So both of these women inspired me and encouraged me and became a source of wisdom from the spirit world that helped me begin to design the program that I do now with my clients, the ancestral story clearing work. And
That's
so
awesome.
Graham really believed that if people want an education, they should be allowed to have an education. And she loved San Diego community. That was her home. She loved being there. She loved education. So it was just natural as a family to unite her love for education and her love for creative arts, unite those together and offer a scholarship to people who really
That's,
want to continue in that, in that industry.
that's
And
awesome.
that's how it all got started.
So always the links to the cause and to your website, it's drmonique.com, will be in the notes on the Facebook Live, or if you're watching this in the YouTube replay, I always put the links to everything. So let's get started. I want to talk about the ancestral wisdom part, and then we'll get to the book towards the end. So from what I gathered, this is like epigenetic DNA a little bit, where our ancestors are embedded into our DNA, but we can change that, right? We're not stuck with our DNA. Can you get into a little bit about what ancestral DNA embedding is?
Yes. So basically, the traumas and the wounds of our ancestors, the experiences of our ancestors, the stories of our ancestors are embedded in our DNA. And those stories are passed down from generation to generation to generation, and they are embedded in our DNA. So when we experience something similar, it becomes even more intense if the ancestors experience something similar to what we're dealing with. So let's say we're experiencing some feelings of abandonment,
Right.
and we have ancestors that experienced abandonment. Then now our energy around abandonment becomes intensified because it's not just what we're currently experiencing, it's also what we're carrying in our DNA. It also means that if we're carrying it in our DNA, there's a strong chance we're going to experience it in our lives as well. So with ancestral story clearing work, what we do is I'm able to work with the ancestors to identify the for example, abandonment, staying with that karmic story. I'm able to identify which ancestors abandonment actually started with and where that karmic story began. And I'm able to work with that ancestor to release that karmic story, to clear that karmic story. So now that ancestor can be a wise guide for us. And we can bring that ancestor in and ask that ancestor to help us, to guide us, to support us with this experience of abandonment. And that goes with any of the karmic stories. These ancestors can actually bring in a source of guidance and support. But I also want to point out that not only do they have these traumas and wounds, but they also have stories of courage and resilience and, their guidance and wisdom. And, we have ancestors that were energy healers. We have ancestors that practice some type of medicine. We may have ancestors that were educators that can now help us, or writers. So we have ancestors that have these beautiful experiences as well. And we want to call those forward to help us in our lives too. So that's the ancestral story clearing.
So now if we have wounded ancestors that are kind of cultivating our, wounds in our present lives, when we heal them, or you help to heal them and heal us, that also clears the path for future generations. Is that correct?
That is the gift. To me, that is the gift. So when we work at clearing these stories, then we're actually clearing these stories for the current generation, and future generation. And when I say current generations, that could be even family members you don't know. It could be family members you know, but it could be family members that you don't know that, were created and established, generations back. So we are actually helping current and future generations, and it becomes a gift. And oftentimes too, I find with many of my clients, they're selected by the ancestors to be the family healers, to help the family to heal. And so sometimes people say, oh my goodness, that's such a burden. And I'm like, no, it's not a burden. It's actually a beautiful thing. You don't have to go to each individual family member and say, I'm placing hands on you, I'm healing you. You really are doing the work for yourself. And then it impacts the rest of your family and your family for future generations.
That is so awesome. So on your website, like I really come through it. It's a beautiful website, drmonique.com. She has a lot of different services from single sessions to 30-day programs. But do you have any current events that are coming up that you'd like to share with us right now?
Yes. So with the Ancestor Wisdom School, it is an ongoing school. This month we're focusing on grief. So with the Ancestor Wisdom School, every month we focus on a new karmic story, one of the 9 karmic stories. So this month we're completing our session on grief. December is a special month. So in December, we are actually getting prepared for your 2020 vision. And we are going to enlist the help of the ancestors. So if there are any karmic stories that people feel like they need clear, so everybody will get a chance to select one karmic story that they'd like to have cleared. We will do the clearing work to clear that karmic story that may be blocking you from really achieving your vision for 2020. And it's going to be an absolutely fun journey. You'll have an opportunity to participate in 2 story clearing sessions where we have group story clearing sessions, and everyone on the call gets an opportunity to ask a question and receive a clearing. We do some meditations. The information that's shared from ancestors for one person often will help other people as well. So it's a benefit to be a part of the group. And so that's what's happening in December with the Ancestor Wisdom School. And I'm really excited because it's something a little bit new and different than what we do usually in the Ancestor Wisdom School.
That's beautiful. So like in a session, is it like hypnosis or meditation, or how does that work?
So in the session, we do a little bit of meditation to get connected to the ancestor, because it is my belief that I don't want people to be dependent upon me to have the connection with their ancestors. I want them to be able to establish their own connection. So I do a meditation to help people connect with the ancestors. And then when we complete the meditation, then each person has an opportunity to say, I'd like to clear, going with abandonment. I'd like to clear abandonment. There's stories of abandonment in my lineage that's impacting my life now. And then what I will do is connect with the ancestor that seems to still be stuck in that abandonment energy, and work with that ancestor to clear the energy, and then invite that ancestor to come forward and share any wisdom. And usually what they'll do is they'll share somewhat of a spiritual practice or something that people can do, whether it's a ceremony, a spiritual practice, some kind of ritual that they can do to help clear that abandonment energy from their lives. And everyone has an opportunity to ask a question around any of the 9 karmic stories.
So in other words, you might have homework that you need to do after the session that to kind of get it going. It doesn't just happen like bada boom, bada bing, you got to kind of work at it a little bit, right?
Yeah. So what I always tell people is attending the session is about 20% of the clearing. 80% is what you do with the information that they share. And they will always give you something to do. And most people tell me that they absolutely love these practices that the ancestors will share with them, because they're very connected and they really resonate with the person. So you'll be given a practice, a spiritual practice that you can do that really easily incorporates into your life. So it's not like, oh my goodness, I feel overwhelmed and I'm, feel burdened by having to do this spiritual practice, but it's usually something that just easily flows and just resonates and is in alignment with who you are and what your soul came here to do. And that's where the deeper clearing takes place.
And so, like, I don't know a whole lot about my ancestors. Do you have to know their names, what they've done, and tell me a little bit about that? And then also, how far back do we go?
Okay. So you absolutely don't need to know your ancestors. Basically, I tell people we know that we had a mother and a father.
Right.
In order for us to be here. And we know they had a mother and a father, and they had a mother and father. So we know that the ancestors exist. We don't necessarily need to know who they are. We don't necessarily need to know their stories. We don't necessarily have to connect with them, because we find that even with people who are adopted, that question comes up. Well, can I even do this work because I've been adopted and I don't know my ancestors? You don't have to know your ancestors. You just know that they exist, right?
Right.
And even if you don't have any information about your family lineage, you know that there's things that happened through history that may have impacted your ancestors. It could be war, it could be famine, it could be a loss of land, it could be the Holocaust, it could be slavery, it could be some particular tragedy that took place, some mass illness that may have taken place, or some major shifting or transitions that took place in history that your ancestors were a part of. And so you know that by understanding that history, that some of these stories are probably embedded in your DNA and in your within your lineage. So that's one way of being able to understand what may have happened in your lineage, but it is not important to know your ancestors. And we can work with ancestors. Usually ancestors up to about 14 generations will come through with me and share their stories. I've had a few that go further back, but usually it's about 14 generations. And usually the ones that we connect with are more often in around the 8th to 10th generation back.
Okay.
Yeah, so about that far back, but we can go at least 14 generations.
So now you got me thinking. That's dangerous. So I don't know a lot about my ancestors, but what if I wanted to like call upon someone who's a great writer, or she or he's a great painter, or there's something that I've always kind of wanted to do, but I want a little help. Can we do that too? Instead of always just clearing something that's, blocking us, can we use them, bring them in to help enhance our skill sets?
Absolutely. And I tell people that all the time. As I said, we have ancestors that really were courageous, powerful ancestors who were talented, who did things that were beyond what people believed that could be possible, that we can bring forward. We can work with not only our ancestors, our blood relatives, but we can actually work with ancestors that were throughout history. And or the ancestors of a friend, or ancestors, or someone that maybe you had a really close connection with and you want to bring them forward. If, let's say, you're getting ready to write a book and you're in this process and you're feeling really stuck and you're having a hard time coming up with the ideas and what you want to do, if there is an author in history that you found was really inspirational for you, who you admired, you can actually bring that ancestor forward and ask that ancestor to help you with your writing. If you're an artist and there's an artist in history that you absolutely love and you're inspired by their work, call them forward, ask them to help you create. So yes, we can bring those ancestors forward that can help us with our day-to-day lives.
That is great. We're going to have to kind of wrap this part up. But before we do, I really want to speak to the 9 karmic stories, because I think that's kind of important. So can you just let us know what those are, to give us ideas of what we can clear in?
Yes. And sometimes I have to go back and look at them, because I'm like, okay, I remember all the 9.
Or okay, 8, whatever.
So there's abuse, abandonment, and addiction. Then there's betrayal, poverty, illness, violence, grief, and shame.
Okay, great.
And so those are the 9.
Yeah.
So I would say that if you're working and you're having challenges in your relationships, Usually there's some karmic stories of betrayal, abuse, and abandonment. If there's some poverty challenges, it's usually poverty, illness, and addiction. And if you're really struggling with being happy and understanding your purpose and being able to fulfill your purpose, usually there's some shame, grief, and violence in your lineage somewhere that needs to be cleared.
What about physical healing?
Physical healing is a part of it as well. So if a person, that kind of lies oftentimes in our abundance and the struggles that we're having, like having abundant health, and so we can actually, if a person is experiencing health issues, then we know that somewhere in the lineage, these health issues probably showed up.
Right.
And do some clearing of those stories to help enhance a person's ability to recover or to deal with the illnesses that they're experiencing.
Right. There we're getting into that epigenetics thing, huh?
Yes.
So you have a free 7-day soul alignment journey. Is that correct? Do you still offer that?
Yes. There's this free 7-day soul alignment journey, and you basically sign up, and every day you'll receive some task, something that you can do to help you become more in line with your soul and help you clear out some of the energy of some of the things that are not in alignment. And it just takes you through this 7-day process. There's some meditations, there's in addition to that, some writings and some activities and some practices that you can do to help become more in alignment with your soul.
That is so beautiful. And that's on her website. Okay, let's get to the beautiful book, The Village Pearls. Okay, people, this is an accumulation or cumulative of over 20 spiritual teachers. So each chapter is a pearl of wisdom. Get the title now. And every author, all these different authors, but you have to buy this book. It's only like $4, I think. Every author, almost every author, gives you something for free. Like they'll go through one of their sacred ceremonies, or we'll speak to a couple of them so you get the idea. I was just in awe reading it, and I was just I just thought, how did you come up with this idea to bring together 20 different people to put together this book?
Well, the way it all came together is, what I noticed is that many of my clients were struggling with spiritual practices, and they were basically believing that there was only one way, that the only way to have a spiritual practice was to meditate or to pray, and so I realized that because of that, many people weren't engaging in a spiritual practice on a consistent basis because they didn't really know what to do. And so I started contacting several of my friends who are spiritual teachers and talking to them about, their spiritual practices, what their clients are doing, what they're doing, what they share. And I thought, wouldn't it be great for people to be able to have a whole book filled with different practices that they can try and see which ones resonate with them and utilize those to be able to now establish this spiritual practice, which I think is extremely important, particularly in the work that I do in connecting with the ancestors. It's important overall, but in connecting with the ancestors, in order to have a relationship with them, you have to connect with them. And in order to connect with them, you have to have some sort of a spiritual practice. And so these spiritual practices help people have a better connection with self and with the spirit world.
And there's so many different kinds. I'm going to read off a couple of them that I kind of resonated to. Of course, so each of you is going to resonate to something different. One, you might go, oh, I don't really want to do that, but I love this. There was a guided soul journey meditation. I love that one. Then I just love trees. Like I grew up in redwood country. Then I moved to Woodland Park. Now I live in the woodlands. Like I just have to be around trees. So when I got to the tree talking part and trees, that was beautiful. And then there was the science of happiness. That one really touched my heart because it was somebody that was going through a horrendous grief. And so really trying to overcome. The breath of love. I love that one. There was one called The Surrender Box. I hope I'm getting you guys interested because you just got to get this book. It's just amazing. And then I actually really like the salt baths too, you know, like it was the clearing of your aura. So those are kind of like, but each one, they get into good detail, but it's only like a few pages for each chapter. It's not this huge book. And then each author will give you their website, and they usually have like free, like MP3s or writings, meditations, and just things like that you get for free, and you get them by going to your website. And so what were your favorites? Or do you have a couple of favorites? So I don't want you to put one author above the other, but
wow, that would be difficult for me to all of the ones that you mentioned were absolutely wonderful. I think Creating Sacred Space was one that I felt was really important, which is why I included it at the beginning of the book, because in creating this sacred space, it opens us up for, you know, doing the other spiritual practices. So that was one that was really important that I really liked. But I found I did all of them, honestly. All of them.
It's fun to do like one every week or something like that. Is that what you did? Yeah.
I did one every week.
Open the book, just open it, and then that's your practice for the week. So yeah, and
I led a group through a 21-day program where we did one a week.
Yeah,
which was really a lot of fun.
That would be great. Like one of them was working with crystals, if I can remember, and there's something to do with water. I mean, there's just like so many different beautiful spiritual practices. Because you're right, we always kind of I got to get up. I'm going to do my drink my lemon juice water, and then I'm going to sit on the sun and meditate for 3 minutes. And it's like, let's get creative, people.
Yeah, let's do different. Let's go out in nature. Let's, breathe. Let's meditate. Let's take a salt bath, whether it's in the ocean, which is a beautiful way to do it, or it's in your bathtub. Let's take a meditation walk. I mean, there's so many ways that we can connect and that we can have these spiritual practices. And I know the one that you mentioned about the science of happiness and the grief, that particular author lost her husband and her son 1 month apart. And she needed to find a way to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And so that's when it took her on that journey. And although she wasn't necessarily a spiritual teacher at the time, I really needed to have her be a part of the book because she's a friend of mine. So I had an opportunity to see her journey and to watch her reestablish her life and redefine her life. And I thought, wow, that's really important because many people are going through grief and need that support. So that was one that was one that I really wanted to be a part of the book. That wasn't quite a spiritual teacher, but was a spiritual teacher. And she wasn't a spiritual teacher professionally, but she was a spiritual teacher for those around her as she went through this journey.
I picked that one out. That one just touched my heart because I think it was one happy thought a day. Yeah. Just like, oh, I want to cry right now. It's just like, just one, I'm breathing. It could be your gratitude for the day. I mean, it was that simple. So tell me a little bit about the science of happiness, don't you?
I do.
I did my work.
Yes. You did.
I know. You didn't tell me some of this stuff. I'm like, she didn't give me enough at being an intuitive. That wasn't too hard. And we just got like another minute. Let's talk about the science of happiness and close it out.
Oh, the science of happiness is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And it really looks at, instead of studying what makes people unhappy, is studying what makes people happy. And we know that having a connection to others is important. We know that following your soul's purpose is important. We know that having a spiritual practice is important, which is why I wanted this book to be published, because we know that's a part of people being happy. We also know that there are those that say that our DNA dictates a level of happiness as well. And what you and I both know is that we can change that, right? We can shift that. so that we can have a greater level of happiness. So the science of happiness is really looking at how people are happy, why they're happy, and then incorporating those things into your life. And it isn't about money. It really is not about money. No. Money doesn't hurt, money helps, and it also provides, you know, the necessary things that we need to live. But what we find is that a person earning $50,000 is not less happy than a person earning $500,000. As long as the basic needs are met, from there, it really is about how people live that determines their happiness. The choices that they make determine their happiness. So the science of happiness is really, really, it's powerful.
Thank you for gracing me with your presence on the show. It's beautiful having you. So nice meeting you. And you guys have to go and buy the book. The links to the book is in all the announcements and in the notes here. Buy this book and you're going to get all these free gifts. I mean, over 20 free gifts, not to mention the gifts that you give on your website, drmonique.com. Village Pearls, Sacred Practices to Nourish Your Soul. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here and inviting me to be on your show. It's been a blessing. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.